Good afternoon. My name is Felicia Orth. I'm a hearing officer appointed by the Water Quality Control Commission to conduct a hearing in WQCC 23-84. This is a water reuse rule. We have come to the 8th of the opportunities for public comment. There are 2 more opportunities tomorrow. Please mute yourselves if you're on the platform. Thank you. This is, again, the 8th of the 10 opportunities this week to offer public comment. We accept public comment from those in the room and also those on the platform. If you have not already reached out to Pam Jones to indicate that you want to offer public comment, please do so that I know to call on you. Just a couple of guidelines. Comment is taken under oath or affirmation. Comment is limited to 1 comment each and limited to 3 minutes. If you have more to say, please submit it in writing to Pam Jones anytime before the record closes. Certainly anytime this week would be within time. So let me start with the names that I have. Reverend Ryan Tate. Reverend Tate, are you on the platform? You may unmute yourself. No? All right. If Reverend Tate rejoins us, I'm happy to take his comment. Leanna, Derek. All right. Are they able to unmute themselves, Pam? All right. Christina Castro. Christina Castro. No? Oh, I see Joan Brown. Sister, will you unmute yourself?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, terrific. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And would you spell both of your names for the transcript?
Joan, Joan, Brown, Brown.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to start your 3 minutes now.
Okay. Thank you, Water Quality Commission and Hearing Officer, for this opportunity to speak at this water reuse hearing. I am a Franciscan sister and Executive Director of New Mexico and El Paso Interfaith Power and Light. And we work with faith congregations and people of faith and or conscience all over the state. Many of our people are very concerned about water, and water is sacred in all traditions. We have an ethical and moral responsibility to not make sister water part of a prevalent mentality that Pope Francis names our throwaway culture. We need to be extremely careful in addressing water use and water quality in New Mexico. In ethical terms, the concerns of communities and our responsibility to and with sister water and future generations must be held as important and high priorities. Often such issues and hearings weigh heavily upon narrowly defined economic interests that bend toward the arc of industry rather than the arc of justice. In a recent teaching document, Laudato Deum, Pope Francis helps people of conscience with a critique of our extreme cultural bias of a technological worldview. While we do need technology, we also need to hold in esteem the meaning of being human and our purpose on the planet, which is to live in community with everyone and everything, giving dignity and rights to all. Paragraph 21 of that document states that an exaggerated reference to technology and power places the power in the hands of a few and does not serve the whole. Quote, everything that exists ceases to be a gift for which we should be thankful, esteem, and cherish, and instead becomes a slave or prey to any whim of the human mind and its capacities. So I believe this critique is important as we are hearing these rules, and IPL is very grateful for this hearing. We would like to make 3 points. 1, please prohibit the discharge of reuse produced water to surface or groundwater, whether it's cleaned or uncleaned. The current rule states this, and we strongly agree with this piece of the rule. Number 2, please remove the definitions that are not relevant to this matter of rulemaking, such as agriculture, environmental buffers, food crop application, and words that are not consistent to the prohibition of use of produced waters. Number 3, remove language for use of reused produced water for industrial projects, or limit the only use directly in the oil field. Currently, there's really not scientific data that shows that technology that currently exists can reduce toxic chemicals in produced water to safe levels, and even trace levels are harmful to health. And we're quite concerned because this cannot be undone once it is done. We are also concerned about waste products and their disposal, which includes from the current, what I call experiments being done with produced water, and also the daily disposal of produced water in the oil and gas field. But we realize that is not the context or subject of this hearing, but we wanted to express that concerns. So I
Would
just
you
want to
wrap
thank
up?
you again for your considerations and your discernment for the Sacred Trust over the next days and weeks.
Thank you very much. Julia Bernal. Ms. Bernal,
Yes, can you hear me?
speak up a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes.
Would you spell your first and last name for the transcript?
JuliaBernal.
Thank you. I'll start your 3 minutes now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm the Executive Director of Pueblo Action Alliance. I've been with our organization for going on 8 years, but have been involved in water resources for about a decade as a student at UNM, as a previous water resources technician, but also culturally, as I am a tribal member of Sandia Pueblo. My family has been farming and stewarding, and even in governmental positions, have been protecting our lands for generations. And central to our culture is water, whether in the form of rain, rivers, groundwater, or clouds. Understanding that our Pueblo communities have the most senior water rights, so we should be an important stakeholder in this discussion. But I wanted to share that I have researched impacts to the reuse of produced water off oil fields. And for example, in the state of Pennsylvania, oil and gas operators were permitted to take their oil and gas waste to specific wastewater treatment facilities to then have that treated effluent put back into the tributary systems. It has had long-lasting impacts where it's been found that the points of these outfalls are where elevated activities of radium in the stream sediment have occurred, and even more so in the past few years, even after the discharges have stopped. And so this is an important example because this is waste that was coming only from conventional drilling sites, because the state, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, they had prohibited oil and gas waste from unconventional drilling to these specific permitted facilities because of high saline discharge. And so if we look at the San Juan Basin and Permian Basin, they have all adopted unconventional drilling. And what we fear that this rule could do is potentially open the door for a one-size-fits-all rule that doesn't consider these long-term cumulative impacts. And I know the state is wanting to see how this treated oil and gas waste can be used for green hydrogen, but hydrogen and produced water reuse off the oil field are pilot programs, and what I'm hearing are trial technologies that haven't been proven at scale. So, we have to ask ourselves, are we going to continue this historic legacy of experimentation or using our sacred lands and waters as testing sites? Because so many people benefit from the diversity of land-based, traditional, and indigenous cultures in New Mexico. And if we're going to continuously impact land and water, we will not have these traditional lifeways in the future. We will cease to exist as the first people of this land. And so our organization urges the commission to think deeply about the environmental, public health, and cultural impacts this type of initiative can have on New Mexico and its communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You hit 3 minutes just perfectly there. Stacy Slay. Stacy Slay.
Hello,
Oh, hello. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
If you would spell your first and last name for the transcript.
Stacieslay.
Thank you. I'll start your 3 minutes now.
And thank you, Commission, for letting me give this comment today. I support a clear, straightforward prohibition against the discharge of untreated and treated produced water to ground and surface water. A prohibition on the discharge of produced water is necessary because there is insufficient scientific evidence demonstrating that produced water can be treated to New Mexico water quality standards that protect the public and the environment. Industry proposals to weaken the prohibition and allow discharge of treated produced water should be rejected. Authorization for reuse of produced water in industrial projects should be removed from the rule. Industrial projects which are not volume or time limited in the proposed rule carry increased risk of contamination of ground and surface water through spills, accident, and inadvertent discharge to public water systems. There is insufficient evidence in the record that ongoing use of produced water is in an industrial setting is even safe. I have serious concerns that the industrial projects will further entrench the oil and gas industry in New Mexico at a time when our top priority should be transitioning to clean and sustainable energy alternatives to protect our climate, watersheds, and communities. Unnecessary definitions in the proposed rule should be removed. Many definitions are unnecessary because they are not included in the body of the rule and therefore serve no regulatory purpose. Definitions such as agricultural application and food crop application imply the rule permits discharge of produced water to land, which it does not. The unnecessary definitions of various land applications can lead to public confusion that the rule is not a prohibition on discharge to land. The rule should require NMED to publish notices of intent, NOIs, for demonstration projects on the agency's website, including projects approved and rejected. If the spills of treated produced water during if there are spills of treated produced water during the demonstration projects, NMED should promptly and effectively take enforcement action against the violators and require immediate corrective action and cleanup. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Emily Tucker?
Yes, hi.
Emily T- Hello. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Please spell your first and last name for the transcript.
EmilYTucker.
Thank you. I'll start your 3 minutes now.
Hi, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to make public comment. My name is Emily Tucker. I'm a resident of Albuquerque and an organizer with the nonprofit Food and Water Watch, and I urge you to reject the proposed water rule that the Water Quality Control Commission is hearing today. This rule is a dangerous proposition that puts all New Mexicans at risk by treating toxic fracking waste and using it for other purposes outside the oil field, industrial production, even agricultural uses. Some might try to spin this rule by calling it produced water, but you cannot produce water. This is oil and gas waste, plain and simple. Even after the treatment process, the waste product remains now in a highly concentrated form that still needs to be disposed of. Furthermore, as others have said, there have been no peer-reviewed studies that prove the treatment process makes the resulting liquid safe to begin with, and experimenting with using oil and gas waste outside the oil field gambles with the safety of our communities, our workers, our water, and our land. The ongoing drought and water crisis is one of the most challenging issues our state must face in our lifetime, but this is clearly a false solution that will only worsen the crisis and ignores the root causes of it. We need real solutions that hold industries accountable for their excessive water use and contamination. And we need to hold the oil and gas companies accountable for poisoning our communities. But this rule does neither. In fact, it further entrenches the industry in New Mexico while rolling the dice with the health and safety of our communities. The industry might call it produced water. They might say it's water reuse, but I want to call it what it really is, which is experimenting with toxic radioactive waste that endangers our state's water and puts our communities at risk. So I urge you to protect New Mexicans, our land, and our water by rejecting the water reuse rule before us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Alejandra Lyons.
I'm here.
Oh, terrific. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I swear and affirm to tell the truth.
Would you spell your first and last name for the transcripts?
Yes. ALEJANDRIALYONS.
Thank you. I'll start your 3 minutes now.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Alejandria Lyons. Thank you, Commission and Chair, for holding this hearing. I'm Alejandria. I am the coordinator for New Mexico No Fall Solutions. I hold a master's degree in community and regional planning. I previously was, interested in a master's of water resource. I held a position at the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Water Protection Advisory Board. And I'm also, I grew up in Bernalillo County, semi-agricultural community. And we hold water rights in Peralta. And so I'm here to preserve the integrity and water quality for future generations, not only through my position with New Mexico No Fall Solutions, but also as a water protector. There's a notion in the state that we need to put water to beneficial use. But I believe that's only true if your only concern is money and your only concern is to continue this boondoggle, which is prolonging fossil fuels and the waste that comes with it. We are in a drought and we need to do something about our water, but we can't negate how much of our water is being destroyed by such operations, our air, our land, our water. On average, oil and gas industry spills are radioactive and they happen quite frequently. In the Permian alone in 2022, those that were recorded was over 30,000 spills. So, I mean, I think that is quite a bit. And for every barrel of oil produced, approximately 4 barrels of waste is generated. I think that the state is trying to solve the oil and gases issue for them, their waste problem. And as many people have pointed out, this rule would allow for this toxic waste to go from the oil fields. And we are upset with the ways that this would allow industrial and demonstration projects for treatment and the disposal of these with no scientific evidence of how the handling, the disposal of these radioactive substances. And so I think we urge the Water Quality Commission to look at the science, to look at what this rule and what you would be approving if you were to move forward with this rule. Because if we look at what the governor is trying to do with the strategic water supply, we are seeing that, we are in this issue where we are trying to make something happen. But really what we need to do is look at the entire fuel chain of oil and gas. And, there's been a lot of talk of hydrogen and the hydrogen economy. And our coalition believes that this is an effort to get this off the ground because they didn't get WISH. The Western Interstate Hydrogen Hub was not approved, and the state is trying to
Please
find
wrap
whatever
up.
water resources it can. So I urge you to continue to protect communities, families, and our future water resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Swan. Jessica Swan. If she rejoins us, I'll take her comment. Reyes DeVore.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hello. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes,
And would you spell your first and last name for the transcript?
yes. REYESDEVORE.
Great. I will start your 3 minutes now.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Ni Waslibahin, Ni Dotae. My name is Reyes DeVore. I am from the Pueblo of Hemet, and I am a mother first and foremost. I currently serve as the program director with Pueblo Action Alliance and had been with the organization since its beginning in 2016. When I think about water, I think about its sacredness, the way it is included in our cultural practices that my Hamish relatives and other Pueblo indigenous peoples have been living with for centuries now. Over the span of defense to protect it from settler colonialism, we continue to remain as the people who are fighting to protect it and keep the sustainability of our culture alive. Present day, we are still having to stand against the desecration and the contamination of land, air, and water that comes now in the form of extractive colonialism. I stand in opposition to the reuse of toxic oil and gas wastewater outside of the oil field. The strategic water supply plan that Governor Grisham announced is not a real solution, as it seeks to use contaminated water for agricultural, irrigation, potable water supplies, aquifer recharge, industrial processes, and environmental restoration, as stated in the proposed rule by the New Mexico Environmental Department. The new regulation being proposed comes as a result of surplus amounts of wastewater from oil and gas fracking, which is also a result of irresponsible practices from industry and the state. It is important to make it known that this plan will ask for $500 million over the next 2 years. What does that mean to us as community stakeholders? It means we're essentially needing to support the enormous wastewater problem, which has been created under the governor's leadership and the oil and gas industry. Additionally, to date, there are no known technologies that are capable of, quote unquote, treating the water to be completely free of toxic contaminants. This puts community health at further risk. We call upon this commission, New Mexico Governor Michelle Grisham, and the New Mexico Environmental Department to reconsider this plan that will impact community, our water, land, animal, and cultural lifeways. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Bernstein. Robert Bernstein. Right. William Athis. William Athis. And if I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize. Ooh, all right. Kathleen Burke. Kathleen Burke. Mary Whiteman. Patrick Hardemio. Mark LeClaire. Oh, I see Mr. LeClaire there among the participants.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do. My name is
And
Mark.
if you would spell
Mark
your first and
LeClaire,
last name. Yes.
Yep, MarkLeClaire. And
Thank you.
thank you for taking my comments.
I'll start your 3 minutes now.
All right. Yeah, I'm a father of 3 here in Albuquerque, and I've farmed across central and northern New Mexico for the past 30 years. And I just want to say that I'm in support of strong rules to prohibit not only discharge, but any use of produced water outside of the oil fields. It's pretty clear, well, it's very clear to myself and to an overwhelming majority of the farmers that I'm in contact with and speak with, that the waste from fracking is really should be reclassified as hazardous waste. People are opposed to any scheme that would lead to that water being used, treated, or untreated in agriculture. And I want to echo some of the other comments that this really feels like a movida to us when if the rule is not about using it for agriculture, then you should definitely remove that language from the bill. It just doesn't sit well with all the people that I talk to here in the valley, up north, the mayordomos, and up north. Everyone is very concerned about this, and we understand that not only is this water hazardous waste, but even I'm sure you've already heard about the health risks from all the other chemicals, but even the salinity of these waters is very concerning to us as farmers. And we understand that we're part of a large interconnected system, and the things that happen elsewhere upstream on other people's lands, those enter the air and water and affect all of us. So we're just adamantly opposed even to any experimentation with these hazardous wastes. And I'm also concerned with the vagueness of the language allowing for industrial use. As someone who's also been a carpenter and a construction worker my whole life, I'm very concerned for worker safety. And this may be beyond the purview of this board, but it seems to me that it's something that we should all be concerned about as far as having just a vague definition of industrial use and from what I understand, no permit required. I'm very concerned about worker safety. And the last comment I'd like to make, because I understand that there are representatives from the oil and gas industry sitting on this board, and it seems to me that if you all want to really enter into good faith conversation with the larger community about the problems that you're having with produced water, the first step you could take would be disclosure of your so-called proprietary fracking chemicals. That should really be the baseline that we begin these conversations from. So
That's your
thank you for
time,
hearing my
Mr.
comment.
Leclerc. Thank you. Kathy Sanchez. Miss Sanchez? Okay. Can you hear me? If she returns, I'll take her comment. Anna Rondon?
Yeah, hey, greetings.
Hello. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
And would you spell your first and last name for the transcript?
ANNARONDON.
Thank you. I'll start your 3 minutes.
Thank you again. Yes, I would like to also greet the New Mexico Water Quality Control Commission. That's a really heavy title and a very strong responsibility to the people of New Mexico. I am born for the Towering House clan. That's where the viewpoint that I am presenting today to you all is from the clan I represent, which is originated over by Crown Point, New Mexico. We have a profound bond with our land, and by observations of your ancestors that came here, I want to evoke them, your indigenous roots from your European descent. There's been a disconnect of your original teachings. So today I come as a Kia'ani Towering House matriarch from our natural laws to present and stand with my voice for the man-made laws that do not protect our people no longer. Even the doctrine of discovery of Christianity some of the oaths you take, it's on a Bible. That same thought of indigenous peoples and people of color and poor whites are less than human. Those days are gone. Today is a new day for our people. And for the people of New Mexico, we're tired of having mini Oppenheimers with this new hydrogen, new ways as experiments again and again. Just like New York, they tried to work with their oil and gas companies on their fracking, but they found that there is too much radioactivity. How much has the New Mexico Environment Department studied the tons and tons of radioactive materials from fracking? From the San
Ms.
Juan,
Rondon, please wrap up.
okay, from the San Juan Basin to the Permian Basin. Really need to protect these bowls of water, not for oil companies, not for outsiders. But with that, thank you, and may the holy people guide you. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Bernstein?
Hey, thank you.
Yes. Do
I'm
you?
Robert. Oh,
Yeah.
do you want to swear
Okay.
me in or should I spell my
Yes.
name?
First one, then the other. Do you swear
Okay.
or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes, I do.
Now I'd like you to spell your name.
Okay, Robert, R-O-B-E-R-T, Bernstein, B-E-R-N-S-T-E-I-N, M-D. M-D is medical doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Bernstein. I'll start your 3 minutes now.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for giving me time to speak. I'm a physician. I've been in Santa Fe for 40 years in private practice and also working at La Familia Medical Center. I'm concerned about everybody's health and especially the health of my kids both kids they're adults now, they're born here, went to public school, went to UNM, and their children. I think the concern here is that wastewater from fracking contains numerous harmful substances, including sometimes radioactive material, uh, um, heavy metals such as arsenic and lead that can cause health harm, especially in young people, but in everybody, and also carcinogens such as benzene and toluene. So, and my concern is that this the wastewater will contaminate our water supply and cause harm probably to us, but certainly to future generations. And again, I think our young people, children, babies are most vulnerable. So I think my opinion, and I should say I'm president of the New Mexico chapter of Physicians for Social Responsibility. So we represent a few hundred physicians in New Mexico and thousands nationwide. I think the rule should be amended or changed so that wastewater should not um, escape or be allowed beyond the boundary of the actual oil field. Um, I'm not sure I'm being clear, but we want this wastewater to be segregated and completely separate from any possibility of contaminating our water supplies. So again, I thank you. I thank you for the time and appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Doctor. Marta Flores?
I'm here.
Oh, great. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes.
Would you spell your first and last name?
Yes, my name is Mara Flores, Maraflores.
Thank you. I'll start your 3 minutes now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Mara Flores. I'm a recent immigrant and a member of EarthCare. I'm here to express my concern about the reuse of fracking produced water. As environmental science has found, the components of this water have high bioconcentration and high solubility. So it's not only about the water itself, but the infrastructure for transportation and the management of it that will be polluted. As you all know, everything is connected on this planet and everything is part of the big cycle of life. So it's important to take into account the possibility of exposure by humans and other beings, and the effects of on their health and metabolism. Regarding the use of this water in agricultural production, even when it could be in a controlled environment, there is the bioaccumulation of the pollutants into the plants. Then it's not clear what the disposal of or use of these plants and their products is going to be. Fracking produced water is hazardous waste that should be managed properly, and the industry that is generating it should be accountable for its safety management. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Flores. Larry Sontag.
I'm here.
Hello. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
If you would spell your first and last name.
LARRYSONNTAG.
Thank you. I'll start your 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Larry Sontag, a United States Air Force veteran, husband, father, grandfather, and 60-plus year resident of New Mexico. I'm part of a statewide grassroots organization called Better Together New Mexico. They encourage New Mexicans like me to get involved in important policy decisions like the one before you and to make our voice heard. So here we go. My understanding is that water reuse or recycling reclaims water from a variety of sources, then treats and reuses it for beneficial purposes, providing alternatives to existing water supplies, and can be used to enhance our water security, sustainability, and resilience. And hear this from the federal agency that has lots to say about water and our environment. That would be the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. According to the EPA, sources of water for potential reuse can include municipal wastewater, industrial process and cooling water, stormwater, agricultural runoff and return flows, and produced water from natural resource extraction activities. Fact is, the EPA does not require or restrict any type of reuse. They encourage states to assert regulatory authority in allocating and developing water resources. So New Mexico, in adopting a proposed water reuse rule, is moving in the right direction. We live in an arid and desert climate, and each year we hear more and more about how crucial it is to conserve fresh water for generations to come. I have children still living in New Mexico, and I have grandchildren living in New Mexico, so this is important to me. We also live in a state that embraces new technology, especially when it provides jobs for working families in our state. Water technologies that exist now and will further evolve from adopting the proposed water reuse rule will require a skilled workforce capable of treating and monitoring the water. Environmental stewardship, to include conserving and reusing as much water as we can, is a win-win for current New Mexicans and for future generations. I encourage you to adopt the proposed water reuse rule that allows for the reuse and recycling of water produced from the extractive activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sontag. Let me ask if there's anyone in the room who is present to offer comment at this session. I see your hand at the back. I see 2 hands at the back. All right. It might be, okay. The department is vacating the witness table here just briefly. Hello, would you state and spell your name?
Yeah, my name is Crystal Curley, Krystal, and then Curley, Curley.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes.
I'll start your 3 minutes now.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Crystal Curley. I'm the Executive Director of a nonprofit called Indigenous Lifeways. I am Dynamic Lanzar Kenyani.
She's giving you her affiliation.
Is my time going to be impacted with
No,
this?
I'll add second.
Okay. My clans are Kenyani Nishlan Kitlan Chitni Bashishchi, Nakaidine Dashiche, Aro Hanagatni Dashinale. And in English, that's Towering House, Red House, the one who walks around in the Mexican People Clan. And while I appreciate the efforts to address the water crisis in the state, I'm deeply concerned about the potential implications of the proposed regulation, particularly in the context of produced water reuse from oil and gas activities. The rulemaking misleads the public into thinking this type of water is reusable, but in fact, this is not water. This is a radioactive waste fluid that is a byproduct of the oil and gas industry. This is not solving our waste crisis. This is not solving our water crisis issue. This is a false solution to the toxic waste management that we are facing in New Mexico. This is merely a cover-up for the toxic waste mismanagement of the oil and gas industry. On average, New Mexico has 2 to 4 oil spills a day. We have no enforcement, no oversight, no monitoring or consequences for this industry. This toxic cocktail, so-called produced water, consists of 1,100 ingredients, and many of which are highly carcinogenic and radioactive. The potential reuse for industrial use will keep us dependent on the fossil fuel industry. There is an irreversible risk of exposure to radioactive contamination to soil and ecosystems, as well as potential adverse effects to human health. There is no appropriate treatment to reuse this fracked fluid. As a mother of 3 daughters, I'm standing here for their reproductive right to have healthy babies and to live in a clean environment with clean air and clean water, as my grandmother and my mother has done so for me. My county knows firsthand the impacts of exposure to radioactive contaminants. We cannot expose this radioactive fluid to our families, land, workers, and animals. I'm concerned that the proposed regulations may not adequately address the cumulative impacts of the reuse of radioactive byproducts from fracking. In a state facing challenges such as drought and depleting water and competing water demands, it is essential that we prioritize science-based knowledge that upholds Indigenous traditional ecologic knowledge as truth. As Indigenous people, we have the right to protect and defend our homelands and sacred sites. We know the devastation this exposure will cause to all earth life, as we have been living with toxic exposure for over 140 years in McKinley County, from oil, coal, gas, fracking, and potentially hydrogen. We will not be subjected to the continuation of rulemaking without the Indigenous people's voice. We are not your sacrifice zone. We are not your toxic waste dump. Thank you for considering my comments on this important issue. I trust that the Water Quality Control Commission will carefully evaluate all feedback received and make a decision that prioritizes the long-term sustainability and well-being of all New Mexican water resources, communities, and hold the fossil fuel industry accountable.
Thank you, Ms. Curley. If you would state and spell your name.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ooh, that's loud. My name is Christina M. Castro, PhD. Christina, CHRISTINAMANA, middle initial M, last name Castro, CASTRO.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes.
I'll start your time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I would like to echo similar sentiments to what Crystal Curley just expressed. I am a Pueblo woman, matriarch, community organizer, scholar, and I come here in defense of my communities. I'm Taos Pueblo and Jemez Pueblo. I am a farmer. I'm very concerned about these industries that are an outcropping of nuclear colonialist interests. Our people have been subject to these industries for, like Crystal said, over 100 years. I really am fatigued in this having to do this kind of advocacy as an Indigenous person in defense for our humanity, our lands, our lifeways. It's really painful, honestly, to have to keep doing this work. Our people seem to be sacrificial to these capitalist interests. Our land, our culture is embedded in these lands. Our ceremonial cycles are embedded in these lands. It really baffles me that we have to sit here and have these same conversations with you all. This is like so elementary. We all live on this land. We all are New Mexicans here, either by choice, by indigeneity. Y'all are here. And we have to keep having these conversations with you about things that affect all of us, not just Indigenous people. We live under Los Alamos. I'm Jemez Pueblo. Our family and our lands have experienced the off runs of all of that toxic byproducts from that industry. Now to think about the nuclear corridor in the southeastern part of the state, thinking about our water being used to frack and then repurposed and sold in industries where, again, our people are going to be most impacted. I don't understand why we have to keep having these conversations. It pains me. It pains our communities. So I would ask you to look into your hearts and ask yourself, what part of the responsibility do you have to protect these lands that we all love? I mean, our whole state thrives off of tourism. We can accept that. Indigenous people are a huge driving force in tourism in this state. You see all these advertisements for New Mexico True, rafting, hiking, backpacking, you name it. People are coming here from all over the world. But yet we have to sit here and advocate for the health of our lands and communities. It's so tiring. It's so tired. It's so like old. It's so antiquated.
Would you wrap up?
Yes, I will wrap up. Thank you for this time. We all are responsible for this. And what you all do and how you vote has a direct impact on only not Indigenous people, but all of you and your progeny and your futures. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Castro. We have time for another comment. Kathy Sanchez apparently may be able to unmute herself at this point. Ms. Sanchez?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. All right. Swear me
do you
in.
swear? Oh, yes. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes, I do.
And if you would spell your names for the transcript.
Kathy, Kathy, Wempovi, WANPO, Victor IVI, Wempovi, Sanchez, SANCHEZ.
Thank you. I'll start your time.
Thank you. Sengitamo umbiagindi. Na no hot nire he came out na mit I know the point nire the kagan na hill. That was just in Tewa so that I could center my spirit with my ancestors as this conversation is held in our immortal lands of ancestors being here and the dead and the dying that are in the ground, the fossil fuels, the decaying animal lives and plants that were here before are being dug up, taken out of their graves before their due time. And so I would like to share a story in a story format, which comes to mind because of what I'm hearing so far. So the story I'd like to share is about two humanoid creatures. And this is a story that an wise elder was telling his grandson about a battle that goes on within people. And I hear this today. He said, "My son, the battle is between two humanoid creatures. They're inside all of us, all those sitting here on the panel, on the commission, on us participants here. One is evil, immorally unholy. It is about power and control over others. It's about money and greed, anger, envy, jealousy, hatred, saving face, arrogance, resentment, lies, false documentations, hyped up, superiority assumed because we can flaunt the money, and very ego Eurocentric orientated. Now the other is good, says the grandfather. It is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humanity, kindness, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion. Do not harm, do no harm, very precautionary, principled, orientated. Now the grandson thought about this for a minute and then asked, but which humanoid creature is going to win? The wise old elder simply replied, the one you feed. You must eat yourself from inside out. If you are without consciousness, without a heart, or be fully in a collective infinity of of relationality of the loving cosmic heart energy within premortal time of our multiverse. I don't know if that story hits home, but I think it should, in that what we're talking about now is we wake up your consciousness. What you're talking about is lip service to an industry that is dealing with terminology that can disguise what it appears to be as produced water, radioactive toxic waste that is a byproduct of wanting just oil and gas. And when what comes up is very not sacred water anymore, and yet you buy our sacred water from people that want to sell it in order to make money, so that there's a win-win for.
Would you wrap up, please?
Okay, yeah, just wanted to raise the consciousness of people, and that I am against this rule to reject reuse this crazy dirty water. Not even water. It's not even water anymore. It's waste product. Thank you.
Thank you. We've come to the end of the public comment, the 1 o'clock public comment session. There are two more public comment sessions at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. There are likely to be additional public comment sessions, but those are the two that we know about right now. Ms. Taylor, I see you on your feet. You have to come to a microphone.
Yes, ma'am. I think if you would agree, this could be a good time to talk about scheduling, perhaps? Or what were you thinking?
What, I was hoping we could finish cross-examination. Mr. Chair, when is the best time to discuss scheduling?
I would suggest we wait to discuss scheduling until we know that Mr. Hightower is online. And my sense was he was going to log in this afternoon when he got to his destination.
Right, and we haven't seen him yet.
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, we haven't forgotten that we need to talk about scheduling. Thank you. All right, we're going to resume questioning of the department panel. When we broke for lunch, Mr. Davis was in the middle of his questions. Mr. Davis, if you have additional questions, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. Given my performance with copying a two-sided document one-sided yesterday, I have decided to try a different strategy. So, Ms. Jones, if you don't mind putting up Wild Earth Guardians Exhibit 15 on the screen, and then I'll ask the panel and the commissioners to take a look at NMED Exhibit 128 on your computers.
Excuse me, it's just the one document?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jones. The exhibit that you see on the big screen here, Wild Earth Guardians 15, is a copy of a provision in the New Mexico Administrative Code, 19.15.16.19. And I'm not going to read subsection B for you, but Ms. Murphy, I believe you, in your direct testimony, testified about the Frac Focus database. Is that fair?
That's fair.
And is it also fair to say that subsection B of the administrative code provision that's up on the big screen requires disclosure in the Frac Focus chemical database for hydraulically fractured wells?
Yes.
And I am going to read subsection 2 there under subsection B, which states that the division, this is the Oil Conservation Division, the division does not require the reporting or disclosure of proprietary, trade secret, or confidential business information. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
If I could turn your attention now to NMED Exhibit 128, can you please describe what this exhibit is?
So part of it is the first page was a snip of the web page, the front of the web page. And then the second was, I think the next page was a snip of what the southeast part of the state looks like. There's a map and it shows a number of wells, actually 14,000 wells. And then below that, it starts to show, there's a little write-up about what Frac Focus is. And then on starting on page 5, it's individual wells. And I just clicked on a number of individual wells to show how they come up. And then what they do is they list trade secrets below.
Okay. So I'd like to start with what I believe there's a series of different wells that you pulled information from.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the first one was a Chevron USA well in Eddy County.
Yes.
And if we look at the chart for this well, there are numerous columns, but there's a column for ingredients. And beside that, there's a column for chemical abstract service number. Could you tell us what a chemical abstract service number is?
I believe it's similar, or it's a an MSDS.
Yeah, I think it lacks SSN social security number. So it's referred to individual person. Each CAS number refers to each chemicals.
Is it fair to say that the chemical abstract service number allows you to positively identify a chemical compound?
Could you please repeat your question?
Is it fair to say that the chemical abstract service number is a number that identifies a chemical compound? It's assigned to a specific chemical compound?
I think so.
Ms. Murphy, I could turn back to you. As we look through the columns for ingredients and chemical abstract service number, and now I've just turned to what's labeled as Bates 003465, but that's just the next page under the Chevron USA well. Are you with me?
Yes.
There are numerous entries into the chemical abstract service number column that do not contain a number. Is that right?
That's right.
Instead of a number, it says proprietary.
It does.
So there's no way for you to use the FRAC Focus database to identify what those chemicals are.
No.
If we turn to the next well entry, this is a Cimarex Energy Company well in Lee County. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And again, if we look at the column for chemical abstract service numbers, there are multiple entries that say proprietary.
There are.
For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but is it fair to say that for each one of these wells that you pulled information from and entered into this NMED Exhibit 128, that there are undisclosed chemicals?
There are.
Is it fair to say that these chemicals are unknown to the department?
They're unknown to me, for sure.
Is it fair to say they're unknown to you because they're undisclosed?
Yes.
Do you know if, let me start over. Yesterday, I spoke with Mr. Hightower about a list of pilot projects that currently exist in the state. Do you recall that conversation?
Yes.
Do you know if there were undisclosed chemicals in the source produced water used in any of those projects?
I don't know.
I believe you also testified earlier in the week that thorough characterization is important for source produced water.
True.
It's also important for characterization along what has been referred to as the treatment train.
True.
If there are undisclosed chemicals in the source produced water for any of these pilot projects, is it possible to attain thorough characterization?
The best available technology that we have is from the consortium, and that's under their guidance and sampling document, and that is the NPDES plus list, whole effluent toxicology, and non-targeted analysis.
Using non-targeted analysis, is it possible to quantify a chemical?
Quantify mean the name?
Quantify meaning the amount.
I don't know about that.
Using non-targeted analysis, is it possible with 100% accuracy to identify all unknown chemicals in a given sample?
Non-targeted analysis is helpful to identify the unknown chemicals. We are not. It's a method to identify the untargeted analysis. And it's a method to identify the unknown chemicals, but it's not the only method.
Is it possible to identify the unknown chemicals with 100% accuracy using non-targeted methods?
To my knowledge, no.
Thank you, Dr. Hu. Ms. Murphy, I have just a few more questions for you.
Okay.
Are you familiar with NMED Exhibit 138? And this is the list of pilot projects I discussed with Mr. Hightower yesterday.
I am.
Ms. Jones, I'm going to have to ask you to put one more up on the screen for me. It's Wild Earth Guardians Exhibit 16, which I uploaded this morning, and I emailed to you as well. Thank you. Ms. Murphy, do you recognize the exhibit that's marked as Wild Earth Guardian 16 on the screen above you?
Yes.
I pulled this from the Produce Water Research Consortium's webpage this morning. My understanding, and it was labeled as an October 2023 update. Are you familiar with that? Is that accurate that it's an October 2023 update?
It says October 23 at the top.
My first question is whether this is the most recent list of pilot projects or NMED Exhibit 138 is the most recent, if either is.
There's a more recent consortium document. We've been emailed it, and I know that because it's in May. And my Excel table, I updated when I added some information about Devon.
So Wild Earth Guardians Exhibit 16 is not the most recent list, to your knowledge.
No, there's a May 2024.
Do you have data from any completed consortium projects? You have completed data from any completed projects?
So can we look at one table at a time?
Sure. And I'm not specifically talking about either of these tables. I really just wanted to know if there was a most current version and which it was. My next question is whether for any of the existing pilot projects that you're aware of, do you have completed data?
So in my table, there's 7 active projects. In my list, there's Canales, that's in the San Juan Basin. There's New Mexico Tech, Tesco, and Hillcorp, that's also in the San Juan Basin. And the rest
are in the Permian Basin, Sun Vapor, Infinity Water Solutions, Tascosa, and Devon. Oh, and one more, Sol Mem.
Do you have data from any of these projects?
Don't believe any of them have completed. I'm not, I think Sol Mem is in Bergendorf. And I believe that the Canales project is in the San Juan Basin, but I don't know that any of the other projects have started.
I'm not sure if you stated this Monday or someone else on the panel did, but is it true that the department's not aware of all the pilot projects that exist currently?
So that would have been in my oral. And that was where I said, I was asked, currently does NMED know where all the produced water demonstration projects are occurring in the state? And I answered, it is unclear. There may be projects occurring in the state that have not submitted an NOI to NMED, and thus NMED has not had the opportunity to determine if they are non-discharging.
Is NMED a partner in the consortium?
We participate in the consortium.
If I could take a swing on that one. I believe it's been mostly described that we're the customer of the consortium, that we are not a member. We have a memorandum of agreement or understanding, not agreement. Agreements have money, understandings don't. And that we are there and are participating in it in order to get the information necessary to promulgate regulations.
Under that agreement, or you may have said an MOU, is part of that agreement about how data will be shared and updates will be given about these projects?
So there is, in the 2022 MOU, there is an information sharing plan, and that is on page 11 of NMOGA Exhibit 029.
Does the consortium give the department regular status reports on these projects?
I can answer that one. We attend the consortium meetings. However, we have not received an update in writing, at least since April of 2023 when I've come on. 2023. And Mr. Herman has been here longer, so he may be able to.
Same answer. Since 2019. 2020. Sorry, 2020 is the correct year.
Has the department made any determinations about these pilot projects based on the data that you have received so far?
So these projects are in their preliminary stages, and the table that I make is based on the NOI. And so in my table, I list pertinent data. what basin it's in, when it's estimated to start, who's the contact person. The estimates of the volumes that they're going to use in the project, the treatment methodology, is it part or the entire treatment train, some of the operational characteristics, the website if a company has it, how long a project is proposed to last, the recovery rate if they have it in there, estimated volumes that they're going to use, and it's and kind of a treatment description. So that's what I put in my table.
Is it fair to say that the department does not have enough data from the consortium to make any determinations related to the pilot projects that are in existence?
When you compare the tables, this is why I made my table. This is not adequate. And so that's why I crafted this table and put it online.
And just to be clear, when you say this is not adequate, you're referring to the table that's marked as Wild Earth Guardians Exhibit 16?
Yes, the table from the consortium.
And I believe you have already said that you're familiar with Wild Earth Guardians Exhibit 16, correct?
Yes.
Is this a true and accurate copy of the table from the consortium's website?
Yes, it's the standard format.
Madam Hearing Officer, I would move Wild Earth Guardians Exhibit 16 into evidence.
I'll pause in the event there are objections. It's admitted.
Ms. Fulham, I'd like to turn to you, please.
Yes.
I believe you stated previously in the week that the dose makes the poison.
I did.
And in your rebuttal testimony, I believe you also stated that, quote, without source water characterization on what contaminants are present, it is premature to determine what treatment options would be viable or what effluent quality could be attained.
That sounds accurate.
Is part of source water characterization the identification of the chemicals in that source water?
It's where we start.
And part of source water characterization would then be to quantify those identified chemicals?
Correct.
If you're unable to identify the chemicals in a sample, whether it's treated produced water, raw produced water, reuse water, etc., waste stream, if you're unable to identify the constituents in that sample, can you determine toxicity?
There are methods to determine whether there's a toxic effect without knowing the actual concentrations.
Are you referring to whole effluent toxicity testing?
That is one of the methods that could be used.
And that's also commonly referred to as wet testing.
Correct.
I'm going to refer to it as wet testing for the rest of our time together because I have a hard time stringing those other three words together, apparently.
Fair.
Ms. Lucas Kamat, I believe you do testify about wet testing?
Yes, I do.
And this is a non-targeted testing method that's purpose is to determine whether a given sample is toxic, correct?
Correct.
And whether it is toxic to whatever specimens it's subjected to. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. Wet testing uses specific, I've got specimens stuck in my brain now, so I can't think of the right word. I have specimens stuck in my brain. It should be species. Use specific species, either marine or freshwater, and the species are selected based on what has the toxic effect.
Is it fair to say that the species that are used in wet testing are not the same species that effluent may encounter in the natural environment?
Correct.
Is it fair to say that the species used in wet testing are not the same species that the testing intends to protect?
Can you rephrase the question, please? Or
Sure.
restate it?
My understanding of wet testing is that there are certain species that are subjected to a given sample, and that those species are not the same species that the wet testing intends to protect. In other words, wet testing could be used in an attempt to determine whether a sample may be toxic to humans. However, humans are not used in wet testing.
Correct.
Wet testing takes place in a controlled laboratory environment. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the lab environment does not necessarily represent a real world environment.
The laboratory environment is a controlled environment. So in that sense, it's not the real world, but it is, yeah.
So if we assume real world means outside of the laboratory, is it fair to say that real world environments may contain cumulative stressors,
Correct.
and that those cumulative stressors are not necessarily replicated in lab testing?
Correct.
Is it also fair to say that real world environments include additional exposures that would not be present in the lab environment?
Correct.
Is it fair to say that wet testing results are variable?
Correct.
You state in your rebuttal testimony that the Clean Water Act's prohibition on the discharge of toxic pollutants in toxic amounts for acute versus chronic or reproductive exposures. And this is in the context of wet testing, and I just want to ask you a few questions about that. Wet testing results give researchers data on acute exposures. Is that right?
Correct.
And so performing a wet test for a given sample, whether it's produced water, treated produced water, waste stream, any part of this process, that wet test does not tell the researcher anything about chronic exposure.
Wet tests are conducted using different dilutions, and they're conducted
there's like an acute series you'd run and a chronic series you run. So if you do a complete wet test, you can get both.
Would a wet test provide data related to exposure, repeated exposure to one of these samples over a series of years?
To my knowledge, no.
Would wet testing account for exposure to the accumulation of toxins over time from downstream sources?
Can you rephrase the question? Because I don't understand how
Sure.
you could have exposure from a downstream source.
Sure. If you, effluent over time can deposit toxins downstream. Is that fair to say?
Downstream of the point of discharge,
Yes. And as those accumulate, cause the dose makes the poison, would the accumulation be, is it fair to say that would be more toxic? In other words, it would concentrate toxins?
Toxins can accumulate downstream of a discharge, yes.
Does a wet test give us any data on exposure to the accumulated toxins?
No.
Mr. Herman, if I could turn to you. You testify in rebuttal, dates 4619, lines 16 through 21. Quote, the only references made to disposal of waste products in the proposed regulations clearly state that all waste products that result from industrial and demonstration projects must be disposed of appropriately and in accordance with all regulations governing those disposal activities, which could include combining the treated produced water and the waste streams back into their original state for transfer and disposal back in the oil and gas disposal facilities that are regulated by MNERD. Is that an accurate statement of your testimony?
We haven't quite pulled it up, but if you're saying that you're quoting me, I'm going to believe you and say yes.
In your testimony that I just read, when you say waste products, would that be the components of a demonstration or industrial project that are outlined in the proposed rule at subsection 400B8I?
Could you give me an example?
Sure.
Of what you're talking about?
Sure. So let's just start with the proposed rule. In the proposed rule at subsection 400B8I, that's the section that states that components of a demonstration or industrial project must be disposed of. I think the word is actually adhere to state, local, and federal law. Is that your understanding of that section?
Yes.
So my question is really, what are the components? So would the components of the project include the waste stream from the treatment train?
Yes.
Would the components also include the treated produced water?
Unless consumed in some way, shape, or form by the project itself, yes.
So if those components, let me rephrase, if treated produced water is one of those components that must be disposed of in adherence with state, local, or federal law, is it also true that the proposed rule dictates that treated produced water must go back to the oil field for disposal pursuant to OCD facilities?
There's examples that would the regulations identify hydrogen production. That would be separating out the hydrogen atoms from the treated produced water. That those hydrogen atoms would not need to be returned to the oil and gas field in those situations. There's a proposed pilot project, which you've mentioned previously, that is testing growing seedlings, pine seedlings. The pine seedlings themselves that have taken up the treated produced water at this time would not be allowed to be dispersed. It would have to be disposed of in that manner, as described in the regulations.
Under the proposed rule, is it true that treated produced water must always be disposed of on the oil field via OCD permitted disposal methods?
I'm going to take my time and think about the answer to this one. I cannot think of an example where that would not be true.
I'd like to ask you as well about reuse water. The proposed regulation defines reuse water as treated produced water that's been treated to an appropriate level for a given end use. Is that a fair?
I think that misstates the definition of reuse water.
Let me pull it up.
I have it up, but I can read it if you'd like.
Sure. Thank you.
Reuse water means a treated wastewater originating from domestic, industrial, or produced waters sources that has undergone a level of treatment appropriate for an application such as agriculture, irrigation, potable water supplies, aquifer recharge, industrial processes, or environmental restoration. Would you like me to continue?
Is it fair to say then reuse water is something different from treated produced water under the proposed rule?
I answer that for you?
Sure.
I would say yes.
Sure. Thank you. So I had the same question about reuse water that I did about treated produced water, which is reuse water a quote component? Could it be? Let me rephrase. Could reuse water be a component of a demonstration or industrial project?
I don't believe so. Would you like me to elaborate? Based on your expression.
Sure.
This is the process, the thought process. So reuse water says that it's treated wastewater originating from domestic, industrial, or produced water source that has undergone a level of treatment appropriate for an application. An application is a discharge. The application is explicitly prohibited under the proposed rules. Therefore, treated produced water is not being used for an application. It is only describing that the water from the produced water source has undergone a treatment process, and treatment is defined. Thus, the need to have some layering of those definitions, because this is not a produced water rule. This is a reuse rule, and so reuse water applies to all water sources that would potentially be used for an application. Just produced water is not one.
Reuse water could come from a treated produced water source.
this point, the way the regulation is written, no, because there are no authorized applications for the use of treated produced water. And a reuse water explicitly states that it's appropriate for an application.
Mr. Herman, going back to your rebuttal testimony, I believe you said that the department has made every effort to obtain research data, produced water samples, and other information in order to promulgate such standards, but has received almost nothing from industry proponents who are pushing for the discharge of treated produced water. Does that sound like an accurate statement of your testimony?
Yes.
My question is whether in that statement you would include the consortium.
Yes.
Dr. Hu, I'd like to briefly turn to you. You testify in your direct at a Bates 000133 through 000144 about different methods and stages of the treatment process for produced water. Is that correct?
Which page?
Beginning at Bates number 000133.
The exhibits we have don't necessarily have the Bates number, so if you give the page number or the PDF
Sure.
number, that is helpful.
Maybe this is a quicker way to get there. Dr. Hu, do you testify in your direct testimony about different treatment methods for produced water?
Yes.
Do you testify in your direct testimony about different stages in the treatment process for produced water?
Yes.
During the treatment process for produced water, does the chemical composition change from the original source water composition?
Can you repeat your question?
Sure. During the treatment process for produced water, does the chemical composition change as compared to the original source water?
It may be.
During the treatment process, are new chemicals introduced to the source water?
I think so.
When you say you think so, does it depend on the type of treatment?
Yes.
Are there types of treatment that introduce new chemicals into the source produced water?
For some chemical methods, you have to add chemicals into the produced water. Then you introduce the chemicals in the produced water.
Does the addition of those chemicals change the chemical makeup of the source produced water?
Depending on the treatment technologies.
Mr. Davis, would you identify a good stopping point for a break, please?
Sure. Just a couple more questions, I think I can be finished. Dr. Hu, I'm sorry, can you please restate your last answer?
Yeah, I said it depends on the treatment technologies.
But there are treatment technologies that would change the chemical composition of the source produced water.
For some chemical treatment technologies, it will generate some byproducts during the treatment.
Would that change the chemical composition of the water being treated?
It may be.
Okay. I have nothing further. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Let's take 10 minutes. We are back after a short break. When we broke, I believe Mr. Davis had completed his questioning of the department panel. We move then to Mr. Dodd, I believe. Thank you. And we'll continue with the questioning.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. I could have just 1 second. Ms. Fulham, I'd like to talk with you about water. In your direct testimony, you write about how water is not made. It's repurposed over and over again. And that's the hydrological cycle or hydrologic cycle.
That's correct.
And water generally isn't created or destroyed. It just moves around and changes form, correct?
Correct.
I'm sorry, hold on, Mr. Dodd. Ms. Taylor? Right. We are in contact with him, but thank you. We're going to finish the department. It's all right. Go ahead, Mr. Dodd.
Thank you. So I have a mug of coffee right here. This mug of coffee was made by taking some beans, grinding them up, and pouring boiling water over them. And doing that, we end up with coffee, right?
Correct.
And I want to ask you a question that can get a little bit philosophical. You would agree that coffee is not water, correct?
Can I ask the line of questioning as it pertains to my testimony or the role?
Yeah, I was going to ask that same question.
I'm trying to give an example that I think is going to be as illustrative.
Right. But even as I'm sitting here, Mr. Dodd, I'm thinking, well, coffee is made with water. Is that where you're going? It's there. So
I'm trying to make a distinction. That's right.
Okay, there are too many possibilities. So if you could either give her a clue as to what path you're going or ask her to confirm something that you believe.
Okay. Coffee has water in it, correct?
Correct.
But coffee is not water. It's not just water, right?
It is not just water.
There are lots of other things in it.
Correct.
For example, it has caffeine in it.
It may.
And generally, you wouldn't give coffee to a child because it might be bad for them.
I really don't believe that this is within my direct testimony.
Mr. Dodd, she's not been given any testimony about childhood development or anything like that.
Okay.
Let's just bring it back.
Okay. So going to the purification process and trying to remove things to remain or to end up with just water. If we were going to process coffee, we would want to test the coffee to figure out what's in it first, correct?
Yes.
And then we would come up with a list of different ways of filtering it and treating it to try and remove all of the chemicals, right?
Yes.
And after we run it through all of those different treatment processes, we would test it again and make sure that we were successful, that all of the identified chemicals had been removed.
Yes.
Now, you would agree that depending upon the liquid that you are treating and trying to purify into water, there may be different processes for doing purification.
Yes. Again, I don't believe that I talked about treatment in my testimony.
Okay.
I mean, if you can point it to me, I'll be glad to talk about it.
I'm going to move on at this point, okay? I just wanted to sort of set the stage for
Yeah.
talking about produced water.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So you would agree that what the oil and gas industry has termed produced water isn't just water, correct?
Correct.
It has water in it, but it has a bunch of other stuff in it as well.
I believe Dr. Who testified to that.
Are you aware of what percentage of the produced water coming out of the Permian Basin is actually water?
I don't believe I testified to that.
Okay. You've heard testimony here during these proceedings that up to 20% of the water is actually just total dissolved solids, correct?
I actually can't quote what I've heard over the past 4 days.
Okay.
At this point,
I know
I'm
it's
sorry.
Have any of the panel, are you any of you aware of that? That 200,000 milligrams per liter can be total dissolved solids in Permian Basin water.
Do you need us to find the reference for that for you?
So Mr. Dodd, I believe I remember that testimony, and so I think that is an appropriate assumption to ask them to make and then ask your real question.
Okay. So 200,000 milligrams per liter is 200 grams, correct?
Okay.
Is that correct?
I'm not in a place to do the math right now.
You can ask them to assume that. That's what you're representing.
I mean, Madam Hearing Officer, these are the members of the New Mexico Environmental Department that are here testifying about the produced water. I'm just asking a simple scientific question.
Can I make a correction?
Yeah.
We are actually testifying to proposed language in a reuse regulation. And my testimony does speak to that, and I'd be glad to answer some questions for that.
Okay, and Mr. Dodd, you're exploring someone else's testimony with them, and I'm not sure how helpful it is to ask them to go through a mathematical calculation related to someone else's testimony. So again, to the extent we heard that testimony yesterday or the day before, you can certainly ask them about it. It's just not their testimony.
Okay. Mr. Herman, it looked like you might have something to say about.
I would attest to 200,000 parts per million is 20% of 1 million. And that if you were to have 1 million grains of salt, or I'm sorry, 1 million grains of capacity, that 200,000 grains of salt in that full capacity would be 20%.
Okay. Thank you. So the reality is that produced water is a toxic waste that's created during the oil extraction process, correct? Or extracted during the oil extraction process.
Could you define toxic?
It contains contaminants.
It does contain contaminants.
And this toxic waste contains complex known and unknown constituents.
I believe that's in one of our testimony, yes.
And there are significant hurdles to treating and purifying the toxic waste to remove all of these contaminants.
I believe Dr. Who testified to that.
And since we don't know exactly what the constituents are of the produced water, that makes it impossible to ensure that all of the toxic impurities have been removed.
I believe that adds a challenge to it.
Because if you don't know what you're looking for, you can't know what tests you need to run.
It does add to the complexity of it, yes.
You state in your direct testimony, and this is at NMED Exhibit 2 at page 25, lines 5 through 7, quote, if the contaminants in the source water remain uncharacterized or unknown, there is no ability to appropriately evaluate what type or level of treatment is necessary to yield the water quality that is protective for a particular application. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Accordingly, you also state in your direct testimony, quote, research to characterize the water is needed to determine if there are viable and effective treatment methodologies for protective reuse applications outside the oil and gas sector, and what constituents are concentrated in the secondary waste streams. Correct?
Do you have?
Sorry, I'll give you the site.
Thank you.
That's at page 6, lines 12 through 14.
That's why I couldn't find it. Lines 5 through 14.
12 through 14.
12 through 14. Yes.
And then looking at page 27, lines 18 to 22. And I'll give you just a moment to pull that up.
Thanks.
Quote, because produced water has variable quality and constituents, an unknowable number of which are unknown, as described in Kathleen Murphy's and Dr. Lehu's written direct technical testimony. Applicable treatment methods are also variable with unknown assurances for water quality. Close quote. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And so ultimately, NMED agrees that the viability of this toxic waste as a wastewater reuse source still remains to be determined, correct?
I would caveat that and state that I have not declared it to be a toxic waste. That's a very definitive term that I couldn't assert.
Let me restate the question
Okay.
then. You agree that the viability of produced water as a wastewater reuse source still remains to be determined.
I can agree to that.
You would agree that NMED does not have the data necessary to evaluate the characterization of raw produced water, appropriate treatment methodologies, potential effluent quality, safe handling practices, or safe disposal practices of the waste streams, correct?
For the first three, for sure. I don't know that I will attest to the last two.
If you could you go to page 43 of your testimony, your direct testimony, at lines 18 to 20?
Yes. Yeah, I did say that.
Okay, thank you very much. And so you would agree that additional research is necessary to determine the appropriate standards for discharge, handling, transport, storage, recycling, and treatment of produced water.
Of the disposition of the treated produced water, yes.
Okay. And that's because at this point, we don't have credible scientific data to adequately regulate those uses of produced water.
In part, yes. There's more to that.
There's other reasons, but that's one of the reasons as well.
Yes.
And because of the lack of scientific data, we don't know the degree of risk that produced water, whether treated or untreated, poses to health, welfare, and the environment.
That would be correct.
So let's talk about the lack of data. NMED is frustrated by the lack of data on produced water, correct?
I don't know that an agency has emotion, so I don't know about frustrated.
The staff members of NMED, some of whom might be present here today and testifying, have been frustrated by the lack of data on produced water, correct?
Again, I don't know that our personal opinions are of any consequence. We have not received the data in order to make that determination. I will give you that.
And you would agree that without data, it makes it hard for you to do your job to regulate produced water, correct?
At this point, there are no discharges, so that does not make that difficult.
Okay. NMED is frustrated with Mike Hightower's leadership and lack of organization at the consortium, correct?
Is that stated somewhere?
I'm asking you if that's correct or not.
I'm asking if that's been stated somewhere.
That's not the question that I'm asking.
There's no frustration that I can attest to.
Okay. The consortium has been unable to bring you credible scientific data about produced water treatment and reuse.
That's not entirely correct. The consortium and NMSU have produced publications regarding produced water.
Some.
Yes.
You would agree that it's inadequate to date, correct?
Inadequate for what?
For you to be able to develop comprehensive regulations regarding produced water.
Standards, not necessarily regulations.
Okay. The reason that the consortium exists is to bring you data regarding produced water, correct?
That's my understanding of the MOU, yes.
Now, looking to your direct testimony at page 13, lines 20 to 23, you testified on direct, quote, data is critical for determining source characterization, appropriate and viable treatment methodologies, management of secondary waste streams, and finding viable applications for the use of or disposal of treated produced water, correct?
I stated that, yes.
And there just isn't enough evidence and scientific data at this point to be able to do those things, correct?
Correct.
Now, yesterday, Mr. Hightower testified. And he stated that NMED had access to information in December 2023 from a project that was not listed on NMED Exhibit 138. That is not true, is it?
Let me pull up Exhibit 138.
Sure.
Oh, the list of produced water demonstration projects?
Correct.
Can you repeat the question again?
Absolutely. Yesterday, Mr. Hightower testified that NMED had access to information in December of 2023 from a project that was not listed on NMED Exhibit 138. That testimony was not true, correct?
I believe it's weird because he's not here. He was referring to a presentation that was given that listed results at a meeting that Susan was at. Yes, Lucas, come on.
So yes, the annual Produced Water Research Consortium had a presentation, multiple presentations that included data, but that was not submitted to NMED.
Okay. Now, data that is coming from, or information that is based on data that has not been presented to NMED is not particularly valuable for NMED in determining how to treat produced water or regulate produced water, because NMED doesn't have the ability to check the data and make sure that it's reliable, correct? And NMED Exhibit 138 is the list of all of the pilot projects that they're supposed to be data reporting for, correct?
This is a list provided by or culminated by Ms. Murphy, and it only has the demonstration projects that are within New Mexico.
Okay.
I'm sorry, and their presence on the list does not automatically mean that we would have data or that data has been submitted.
And that's because many or most of those projects, there's been no data reported, correct?
Correct.
Now that spreadsheet that's in evidence is NMED Exhibit 138. As it's presented by NMED, it's in a PDF format that I find a little bit hard to navigate. And so NEE has uploaded NMED's Excel spreadsheet in the Excel format as NEE Exhibit number 17. And that is in the Dropbox folder. I don't know if do you guys have access to the Dropbox folder from there?
I do not.
I will fetch you Ms. Nanasi's laptop so that you can look at the Excel spreadsheet, just because it's easier to navigate. Okay?
Thank you.
Could I have just a moment? This folder?
Yes,
Ms. Nanasi just emailed it to you. Can you pull it up there, actually?
I actually
don't have
cannot
it.
access anything
figured
while
that
we're
might
testifying. We do have a hard copy here that I can refer to.
Oh, there's Ms. Nanasi now. Oh.
May I refer to the hard copy?
You could, but I'm telling you now, it'll be complicated. Mr. Gallum is going to provide you with a laptop with it. And Ms. Jones, if you could possibly pull it up as well. Ms. Nanasi sent it to you. It's NEE Exhibit 17. That's correct. So as Ms. Jones is pulling that up, I'll ask a few questions. Now, Mr. Hightower testified that for the first 7 projects on here, the ones that are highlighted in yellow, that NMED hasn't been provided any data because these projects are just getting off of the ground, correct?
I believe that Mr. Hightower gave a reason for each and every one of these, and some of which have not begun.
Okay. But he did assure us that the consortium would upload all of that data when they got it, correct?
I believe he did make a statement to that effect.
So I want to look at the first project listed on this exhibit. That's the Canales project, right?
Yes.
And could you scroll over to column Y for me? And if you could please read the information for the Canales project in column Y. That's the one that's labeled lab analysis.
It says completed lab analysis through New Mexico PWRC, meaning Produced Water Research Consortium, Risk and Toxicology Protocol. Lab analysis has been completed and should be available on the New Mexico Water Star data portal.
NMED hasn't received that data, has it?
No.
Now, could you go over to column X for the same project, the operations and time frame for pilot column?
I'm there.
And Ms. Jones, is there any way that you could zoom in a little bit on that? I'm sorry, Ms. Jones. A little bit, I think. There we go. Yes, and if we could go over to column X, please, the operations and time frame